Rise of Hawk, Part 3, Scene 1. 17th of Arakan 3004, nearly a year later. Early morning in the Great Northern Desert, just south of Irpa City. Standing in front of Zach was a wooden mask. It was colourful with thick lines of black, red and white and orange painted on it to accent its avian features. The mask was oddly terrifying to look at, but it was also something hopeful to Zach because it was the hawk mask. The man under the mask wore all black, and floating in the palm of one hand was a flame which flickered red and green as it burned. The cry of a hawk bird sounded from above Zach, and he turned from the man to look up at the sky. He found himself standing on a road, staring up at the agency tower. The city around him was utterly silent, as if it was holding its breath. A loud boom vibrated through the structure and down into the concrete under his feet. Fire blew out of the building many stories above, exploding glass and debris into the air. Zach stared up at the fire and watched the debris falling towards him. He wasn't surprised, nor afraid. He simply watched it fall towards him and the road. He closed his eyes, hearing the sounds of broken glass as it hit the tarmac around him. He knew any moment that a large piece would cut through him and he'd be dead. Bah! Zach woke suddenly, a squeak of fear escaping him as his whole body tensed up. Recognizing the cell around him, he groaned and closed his eyes again. Zach didn't mind having dreams or visions, because he'd had them for as long as he could remember. But what he disliked was when they were about the things he couldn't change. He understood the hawk dream a little. He knew the mask was simply the symbol of hawk, and the fire in his hand was the explosion in the tower building that would happen sometime in the future. He even sometimes dreamed of the location where Hawk would get the explosives. What he didn't understand was exactly how he, Zachary Kane, stuck in an agency desert training base until he was 18, was going to do anything with that information other than not telling the agency. He wiped his face and sat on the narrow cot. His feet ached, and he pulled them around to rest his scorched soles on the cool concrete floor. He sighed and looked down at his reddened toes. 3 days in a row the weather had been scorching hot outside, so hot it cooked the black sand of their exercise yard to a point where it burned his skin. And 3 days in a row the guards refused to let anyone over the age of 14 wear their sandals outside. The kinetic kids could protect their feet by virtue of their psi ability, but as one of the few older non-kinetics left in the base, he had to simply suffer through the exercise. He leaned forward, his roughly cut black and red speckled hair fell over his grey eyes. What was the point in having a hawk dream, or any time-psi dream of the outside world, if he was only going to die there in the desert, like all the other non-kinetic kids in the training base? If the guards didn't get him, one of these days Rega, the biggest bully, would manage to isolate him from his friends and kill him. Closing his eyes, as he felt it, a deep wave of static pushed out of his stomach and flowed up and down his body in an oddly tickling sensation. The static wave brushed aside all sensations of pain and fear, replacing them with an odd feeling of disorientation that quickly turned into vertigo. Images flickered through his mind, one after the other in quick succession, like an old-fashioned movie. The guard, the one with the nearly silver-grey eyes that always picked on Zach, stood over him. The guard lifted a metal rod and started to beat him. Over and over the rod came down, and under the barrage he watched himself slowly die in an ever-increasing puddle of blood and broken bones. Along with the disturbing images, he also sensed how very little time he had left. "I'm going to die in a week," Zach swallowed. "I have to get out of here." The images continued until he reached his own death. Then the vision did something that had never happened before. The process reversed, unwinding the video of his death and back through the time that he was currently living. The vision hovered over the present moment for a few seconds, echoing oddly with reality as he watched himself watch himself. Shifting again, the images sped up a little and went forwards a few minutes. Knowledge poured through his mind, and with his eyes still closed, he reached the shelf in front of him for a drawing pad and pencil. Without looking, he scrawled a sequence of numbers across the page. When the sensation eased away, Zachary Kane was very, very calm. He put the paper down on the grey blanket next to him. Leaning forwards again, he looked down at his feet and smiled at his scorched toes. It would be okay, because dawn would reveal a massive rain front coming across the east towards them, so there would be no more burning sand. He waited. A sense of blue calm spread through the narrow concrete room. The blue came from a point directly in front of Zack and sparked at the edges with a deep, dark static. Zack knew who it was. He lifted his face to look at the point in front of him, where he knew the invisible presence of Hawk hovered. "Hawk," he whispered. "My name is Zachary Kane. I've seen you there in the threads of time. I know how to get the fire you need for your attack on the agency." He swallowed tensely. "I can help you, but you have to get me out of here. If I stay, I'll be dead by the 1st of Mekra." The boy lifted his drawing pad from next to him and held it up for Hawk to see. He didn't know exactly what the numbers meant, but he knew that they would help Hawk find him. A line of cool static flowed towards the paper and touched it for a moment. Formless touch withdrew, and a sparkling blue voice spoke in his mind. "The rebels will come." Scene 2. The same day, mid-morning. Church of the Founder, Aram City. Father Andrew stood in front of the dark wood door, his knuckle centimetres from the wood. He wasn't sure if he should interrupt whatever the young man was doing, because it was probably something important and something to do with the agency. But he had asked to be told, so after pausing, Andrew nodded carefully. "Come in, Andrew," a voice spoke through the wood. Andrew took a deep breath to ease the anxious tension in him and pushed. The room was warm from late morning sunlight, which filtered through the stained glass windows on the far wall. The light flickered colour across the nearly empty room, painting the dark stone walls, white ceiling, and the old hardwood desk in the centre, with flares of coloured shapes and shafts of white sunlight. Andrew smiled slightly. He'd always loved this room. "Yes, correct." The young man stood at the desk, an old phone receiver to his ear, a serious look on his face. "Should be a large shipment of illegal arms in the east-facing bedroom, as well as a small number of illegals protecting the cache. An hour? Confirmed." The young man put the phone down and glanced at Andrew across the room with those vivid blue eyes of his. It continually baffled Andrew how a man in his position could remain so utterly calm. He would easily have had a heart attack in the first week, let alone nearly a year under cover. The young man gave him a reassuring smile. "What's wrong, Andrew?" Yes, the girl. Her exam is nearly finished. You asked me to tell you." "Oh, thank you." One corner of his mouth twitched up. "Father Andrew, you shouldn't be so tense. You look anxious enough that you'd risk a heart attack at any moment." Well, Andrew fussed for a moment, mildly uncomfortable that his anxiety was so obvious. "I wasn't made for a life of intrigue and deception. I'm not very good at lying, especially to such a lovely soul as Nalana." A patient look crossed the man's face. "Father, you lie to protect. I've ensured that the cathedral is safe from the agency. They wouldn't dare come here again looking for trouble, and the rebels won't come if they have no reason to do so. All you have to do is be calm, play your part, and you'll be just fine. So relax. I've got it all under control." Andrew sighed again, still afraid but pretending not to be. So far the young man had kept every one of his promises. All he could really do was trust that the Founder had a plan, and have faith. Pulling an old leather jacket over his tattered rag clothing, the young man bowed his head slightly. "Thank you again. I should leave before Nalana comes out of her nursing exam." Andrew lifted a small leather-bound book out of a pocket in his robes. "Got another apocryphal text for you. Would you give it to Nalana, please? It'll help towards my cover." "Of course. What about your exams?" The man seemed impatient. We'll have to postpone them for now. For now, I must go." Scene 3. Nalana left the cathedral floating on a cloud of joy. Her first ever exam. 9 months' worth of hard study condensed into one 3-hour exam, and she had done it. Her mother would be so proud. Laughing in her joy, she skipped across the black cobbles of Cathedral Square and into the relative safety of a dim lane between buildings. It was safer for her in the alleys instead of out on the street, where someone could spot her without her spotting them. Sure, in the alleys you occasionally met up with dangerous folks, but she was always careful that there was nothing obviously worth mugging her for, and for the times when someone might want to take something else from her, she had the nasty-looking flick knife Marcus had given her to dissuade them. As she walked down the narrow lane between buildings, she sensed Nathan cross the edge of her empathic range from behind. He was physically invisible, but she was almost certain he let her sense him, because they both knew he could do that empathic invisible man thing and completely hide from her senses. Stopping, she laughed and looked behind her. "You know full well I can feel you, Nathan. Come on out." The trash can behind her chuckled. He stepped out of the shadows next to it. It was worth a try. "So," she restarted her swift pace down the long alley. "What's going on today?" "Not much," he said as he matched step with her. "How was your exam?" She grinned. "I should get an A. Well, Gabriella will." His normally stoic face had small signs of happiness. Shining blue eyes and the edge of a smile twitched the sides of his mouth. She sensed that he was excited about something. Nala lifted an eyebrow at her friend. "So, come on, what is it? What's going on? I can feel something itching at you. Spill." The edge of a boyish excitement flashed in those amazing blue eyes of his. "We're going to attack a desert training base." She blinked at him. "Really? How are we going to do that? Aren't those places really secure?" Mischief lifted one corner of his mouth into a smirk. "And?" "You?" Laughing, she brushed playfully at the back of his unruly sandy-coloured hair. "You have a death wish, don't you?" He straightened the mess she'd made with his fingers and chuckled. "No, not a death wish." His voice softened. "And how is Father Andrew today?" "He's good." Pushing her hand into the flap of her bag, she lifted out an old book. "He sends his love and your homework." He took it from her and opened the old leather-bound text. "Thank you." "So, what's this one about?" "This is an apocryphal text," he answered, but didn't look up from the book. "It pertains to the Nerean Micran mythos, but more about their historical counterparts than the modern myth." He lowered the page to show her the vertical script, where a rough pen line had boxed in a passage. "Look here, Nera, despite her absolute goodness, is said to be jealous and petulant about Mekra's attainment of mid-priest before her." He flicked the page to another boxed passage, and here Mekra, embodiment of all evil, lets a thief live due to his compassion. Excitement was in his eyes as he glanced at her. "Some of the historical facts of the patrons contradict with doctrinal stories. It's part of my training to explore both sides. How can I be expected to have faith in the patrons if I do not know what they were really like?" He closed the book. "Like Hook. I want to know the man, not this ridiculous story, that so many people tell of him. He's just a man, not an infallible supernatural being." His voice trailed off and she smiled. "You want to hear more about Hawk, don't you?" A playful half-smile twitched at one edge of his mouth. "Maybe." Laughing, she shook her head. "Fine. Where did we leave off last night?" "How different time speakers are." "Ah, yes." She turned off to the left into an adjoining lane, and he followed. "Time speakers are not in possession of powers greater than anyone else. What makes them extraordinary is that they experience time differently from other people. Ma talked of time like threads that flowed in branching lines or spirals, sometimes even coming upon themselves in perpetual loops. She spoke of certain moments in her life where it felt as if she was many things at once. She said it was as if she was somehow many people all living their lives at different points in time, but that she was experiencing them all in the now, as if she was living all of her past and future lives at the same moment. "That is the strangest idea." His voice was quiet, almost introspective. Then it shifted. "So, you said your mother felt Hawk was different from other time speakers." She shuffled the strap of her bag to a better position over her shoulder. "Yes, but she never really explained why he was different, just that—" She caught herself. That information could be dangerous to Hawk. Giving a little shrug and a frown, she looked sideways at her friend. "You know, I can't really remember, just that he was different." Nathan was quiet for a long time as they walked through the alleys and lanes. She couldn't sense anything in him other than a sort of muted introspection, and for the millionth time she wished she was a telepath so she could see what he was thinking. 2 whole blocks went by in an easy silence between them, and then his voice was quiet. Do you think the agency could take him down? I mean, he is just a man. She smiled. Well, for all our sakes, I hope not. But I guess that's why only one person knows who he is, to protect that secret. What would you do if you found out? She shrugged. I don't know. It depends on what he wanted me to do with that secret. But if I knew and I was about to be captured, I'd probably kill myself. He seemed surprised. Why is his life more important than yours? It's not, but without his skills to see the future and the symbol of hope that he represents, the rebels will die. So in protecting him, I'm protecting the rebels. Irritation flared in his blue eyes. But he's just a man. It's wrong that so many of the rebels deify him. It's also a blatant lie. It's not a lie, she corrected. It's just not the complete truth. People need hope to survive, and to keep that hope alive, they need heroes and silly stories. This story is Hawk's mask. It keeps himself and the rebels safe, as long as he knows that it's not who he really is. I don't think he's lying by letting the rebels tell those stories. Nathan grinned at her, bringing a genuine affection and amusement to a face that was too often stoic. You're very wise for someone so young. She laughed. In an attempt to hide the blush that was rising into her cheeks, she skipped ahead of him around a corner and into the street beyond. There was a frown in his voice. Where are we going, anyway? Reese's safe house, she said over her shoulder. They found some crowns and stationery in their last raid. She offered them for the kids if I came and got them. She sensed a flare of surprise behind her. Risa, didn't they also get a large stack of weapons? She laughed. Yeah, but I'm not visiting for the weapons. His voice shifted into tension. We've got to get back to base for chores. Why not come back later? She pointed across the road at the one-storied house. Her building is just here. It won't take a moment. I'm sure Nama won't bring out the whip if we're a little late. I'm not so sure about that. I swear he doesn't like me. Nalana laughed. Nama's just like that. She glanced back at him and her smile dropped. He seemed to be genuinely tense about something. What is it? Please, let's just go back. I've got a bad feeling. Something's wrong. She frowned. Perhaps she could go back. Everyone knew a dodge talent came from either kinetic or clairvoyant genes, or both. And if his talent came from a clairvoyant parent, he might be able to sense when something was wrong before it happened. Nala, someone called from across the road. What are you doing standing on the street looking daft? Reese's voice broke the tension in Nalana, and she turned, laughing at the old woman standing on the porch. You got those crowns? Yep, feel like some lunch? She glanced sideways at Nathan. Nah, we don't have time. Maybe next visit? Sure, chickie babe. Reese gestured with a wave for Nala to come inside. Come on in and I'll get them for you.